Okay, so we can ignore that. We're going to focus on our book. So I just saw you looking at it, and so we're going to start by looking at the cover, okay? So can we read the title? Becoming a Spacewalker, My Journey to the Stars. So after looking at this cover, what do we think this book is about?
Walking on the moon.
An astronaut, a person who walks on the moon.
Spacewalking.
So last week when we were doing our All About Me posters, Delvon said he wanted to be a scientist, right? You remember that? So do you think this guy has to know some science to be in space? Yeah, and I want to know something really cool about this astronaut, who is Jerry Ross.
Just like Bob Ross.
Same last name. He went to Purdue. He was a Purdue student, just like me. So, see, and when we flip it open, he goes Purdue University, West Lafayette, Indiana, which is so close to where we are right now.
Okay, there's New York.
Yeah, this is a cool map.
Is Nebraska on there?
Yep, right there. Okay, so this book is really long and there's a lot of words.
No.
But we're not going to read the whole thing because that would take a very long time. Oh, that's okay. So we're going to start where Jerry Ross, or Jerry's story to space starts to. Okay, so we're going to start with the space age. So as we read, we're going to think about what Jerry had to overcome to get to space. So Jerry's going to face quite a few problems. What do you think some problems could be to get to space? What do you think are some hard things you have to do to be able to go to space?
Get a rocket.
Getting a rocket might be hard. Do you think he has to train to go to space? He has to learn a lot of things?
He has to get the whole suit on.
Yeah, getting the suit on. Those are some good predictions about what are some of the hard things he might have to do to get to space.
Getting afraid of the heights.
Oh yeah, that is a big one. Okay, so let's begin.
There he is.
The space age. So while we're reading, let's be thinking about some of the problems he's facing, because we're going to talk about them, okay? In the fall of 1957, I began the 4th grade while American scientists and engineers, were successfully launching rockets towards the outer space. Scientists even predicted that humans might one day venture out into the stars and live on orbiting space stations. This really captured my imagination. My teacher was Miss Effie Laney. Yeah, I think so. She was the kind of teacher who made her students want to learn. She encouraged and inspired us. She made learning fun. Does Miss Carrillo make learning fun? Yeah, I bet. For me, Friday, October 4th, 1957 was a normal school day. At lunch, I traded my cookies for a candy bar. We played marbles at recess, and I won. I got an A on my arithmetic test, which is math. But when I clicked off my bedroom light that night, little did I know that on Saturday I would wake up to shocking news. Television and radio bulletins announced to alarmed Americans that the Soviet Union, which is a country in Europe, had launched the first man-made orbiting satellite, Sputnik 1. A satellite's like this metal thing that they put in space. Sputnik, that's the name of the satellite.
Oh.
The newsman said, "The world will never be the same. This is the start of the space age." On Monday morning, Mrs. Laney, my teacher, told us that Sputnik was the first object humans had launched into space that did not fall back to Earth. It stayed up there in orbit. This excited me beyond words. I read that Sputnik might be visible in the evening sky shortly after sunset, so for many nights I stood in our front yard scanning the heavens. I wanted so badly to see Sputnik scooting across the night sky, but I never did.
Until you build a rocket.
Yeah. Making a scrapbook. I wanted to learn even more about satellites and rockets. For a while, I've been searching for pictures and articles in newspapers and magazines that my aunts and uncles saved me. I cut out the articles and studied them. After the launch of Sputnik, an American's first man-made satellite, Explorer 1, so that's the American satellite, newspapers and magazines exploded with space news. One afternoon, Mom watched me sort through my pile of articles. "What if I help you organize your collection? We could paste them into a scrapbook. You can add the blank pages as you find more." The next day when I got home from school, My mom presented me with a brand new scrapbook. Gee, thanks, Mom, but how do I start? My mom helped me. So here's an example of his scrapbook. So we have pictures with some space with captions, and that's what a scrapbook looks like.
My niece wearing my mask.
How about our face wears our mask? How does that sound? There we go. Okay. So as we read this page,
That's a big chicken.
as we read this page, let's make sure we're thinking about some of the hard things Jerry has to do and some of the problems he's facing, okay? The more I added to my scrapbook, the more I learned. For instance, I discovered that people doing space work had gone to college. Some were scientists or engineers. Some were pilots. Do you know what a pilot is? Yeah, it flies airplanes.
It flies airplane to, like, if this was Nebraska, people wanted to go to Nebraska. The pilot would drive them there.
I learned that engineers used arithmetic, math like earlier, to figure out how many rocket stages were needed to launch a payload, which is like a lot of stuff, into outer space. I thought, I'm good at math. I love science. I could do that. Then I read that many engineers graduated from Purdue University.
Hey, you have it on your mask.
Purdue University. Purdue is in Indiana. Maybe I could go to Purdue. Maybe I could even become an engineer. Right then, at 10 years old, I set my sights on going to Purdue. I made it my goal. But I needed a plan. Okay, this is where we really need to be thinking about some of the problems that Jerry might face. First, I figured that I would need good grades to be admitted into Purdue, which means allowed to go. I thought, I don't need to get straight A's, but
He needs to be smart.
but I study hard. I can get the grades. Second, I would need money to pay for classes, food, and a place to live. The cost was a problem. I concluded that my parents might not be able to afford to send me and my sisters to college. Then I thought, I have a few years. Maybe I could save enough money to help my parents. I spilled out the coins in my money jar. I counted $4.67. It was enough. It wasn't enough. I was going to have to get a job. But who would give a job to a 10-year-old?
Probably the food workers.
So on this page, what was one of the problems that Jerry had?
He needs money to go to college, and his sister needs to go to college.
So what was his solution to his problem?
He needs to get a job.
Get a job, yeah. So kid for hire. Mom and Dad spread the word that I was looking for work so I could save money for college. I didn't get paid much. For $1 an hour, I painted fences, baled hay, which means like collecting a bunch of hay, trimmed pine trees, and mowed yards.
How can you trim a pine tree?
He probably has some tools that help him do that. A neighboring farmer hired Jim and me to help vaccinate 400 chickens. Do you know what vaccinate means? It means like give them medicine to make sure they don't get sick. We worked at night because the sleepy roosting hens were easier to sneak up on. The farmer showed us how to grab a hen by the legs and flip her upside down. These some roosters. Then we were instructed to carry the hen to the farmer, and he gave them the vaccination. The hens were not at all happy about the whole thing. Getting shots is hard sometimes. For 2 hours in the dark, we hustled back and forth from the hen house to the farmer, carrying squawking chickens. Squawking is like, "Papa, papa, papa." That's a good squawk. Around midnight, Jim pointed out a few hens roosting in a tree in the chicken yard. Before Jim could stop me, I shimmied up the tree. Balancing my feet on a branch, I reached up and grabbed 4 hens by the legs. What? 2 in each hand. Isn't that crazy? Okay. After a few weeks of work, my money jar was overflowing. Mom drove me to the First National Bank of Crown Point, which is in Indiana, where I opened a savings account. Every time I deposited money, the bank teller added it to my balance.
Yeah. June, he had $7. March, $21.
Yeah, so it made him feel.
Hey, that's my birthday. 20.
It made me feel good to see my money grow. It made me want to work even harder. Here's the second page of my bank book. Can you find the largest deposit? Let's look. What's the biggest deposit? What's the biggest number right here?
Bring it back to you in just a few minutes as soon as I get it tested, okay?
Oh, I think I found it. What is it?
That one?
Yep, this one. What number is that?
You're covering it. Oh, 100.
100.
I
Yeah.
thought you were pointing to this one. I'm just like,
Oh.
I can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, 100. I saved for college, for model rockets, and later for a small motorcycle to drive myself to work.
It's still recording.
Yeah. Okay. So he goes to college and he gets his degree from Purdue. And then he gets admitted into the space program. And my first space shuttle flight began on a crystal clear night at Kennedy Space Center, November 26, 1985.
Why is that live head circle?
Because that's Jerry. Dressed in our flight suits, 6 other crew members and I arrived at the launch pad. I was awestruck at the sight of the space shuttle Atlantis. It was no longer just a space vehicle waiting silently on the pad. Now it was filled with tons of rocket fuel. It hissed and groaned. Clouds of supercooled air billowed. Energy radiated. It seemed like Atlantis was alive. We rode up the launch pad elevator, entered the shuttle, and strapped into our seats. During the next 3 hours, we completed our pre-launch tasks. At 5 minutes before launch, the shuttle's auxiliary power units were started, and our seats began to vibrate. As the countdown proceeded, everything seemed to be happening faster and faster. Here, let's wait. At 6 seconds before launch, the 3 main engines roared to life. I felt the whole shuttle shaking on the pad. In my head, I counted down the final seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. In a thunderous explosion, the solid rocket boosters ignited, and the shuttle roared off the launch pad. Atlantis accelerated upward and rolled to the right. In 40 seconds, we were moving faster than 760 miles per hour, way faster than a car. The speed of sound. We hurtled towards space, our speed increasing. Our path started to bend. We began moving more parallel, which means this way, to Earth's surface. Acceleration continued. Invisible forces pinned us back into our seats. I felt like I weighed 600 pounds. In about 8.5 minutes, at just the right speed, the shuttle's engines turned off. Atlantis was in orbit around the Earth, which means they were in space. We unstrapped and floated in weightlessness. If I could have stood on a scale, here's what I would have weighed. 0. You don't weigh anything in space because there's no gravity. So they're all floating around. After 3 days...
I feel 0 pounds.
After 3 days spent working inside the shuttle, and at last it was time for me to go on a spacewalk.
What is this for?
Those are for me. It was time to go on a spacewalk. So here's him out on a spacewalk, which means he's outside of the space shuttle and he's in space.
Can you see shooting stars up there?
You can see all the stars. My challenge to you. I was 10 years old when I decided that I would go to Purdue University, learn to be an engineer, and work in our country's space program. Pursuing those goals became a long journey of discovery and adventure. I planned, I worked, I saved. I tried to learn everything I could about spaceflight. When an obstacle appeared in my path, I tried another way. I kept believing that I could. You can do this too. What are you curious about? What do you love to do? Where could this take you? Then, make good decisions, do your best, study hard, work hard, and don't give up too easily, because your dream can come true. Okay, so after that, we're going to think about some of the hard things that Jared had to do. So we talked earlier about one of the hard things. Can you remember what it was?
He doesn't have enough money.
So Jerry. And where was Jerry when he didn't have enough money? Do you remember? It's okay. He was young. He was like 10 years old and he was working on a farm, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And so what was his problem? He didn't have enough
Money.
And how did he solve that problem?
He needs to get a job.
And what was his job?
Painting fence, getting the chickens their medicine.
Nice job. So if we were going to summarize everything that we learned in this book, we're going to, well, what would we say? So in one sentence, to summarize everything we just read, what would you say?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, we can do it together. So who is our main character in this story? Here.
Jerry.
Jerry. Okay, so what did Jerry do? Or what did Jerry want?
He wants to go to Purdue University and go to college and go to space.
So Jerry wanted to go to space, but what happened?
He didn't have enough money to go to space.
So Jerry wanted to go to space, but he didn't have enough money.
Purdue
Yeah.
University.
So what did he do?
He went to go get a job for to get money for Purdue University.
So Jerry wanted to go to space and to college, but he didn't have enough money. So he got a job, and then what?
He got enough money, like $100.
He got more than $100. So Jerry wanted to go to space, but he didn't have enough money. So he got a
Job.
and then he had
Enough money to go to space and college.
Yeah, exactly. So we thought about some of the problems and we figured out what was going on with Jerry, and then we summarized the whole book. So that was a really great job. So next time we're reading a book or we're asked to summarize or retell, we're gonna think of who the main characters are. So in this case it was Jerry, where they were, what they were doing, some of the problems they faced, how they solved those problems, and then what happened after those problems. So that's what we have. Jerry, who's our person, what he wanted, which was to go to space. What was the problem? He didn't have enough money. What did he do? Got a job, and then he had enough money, which is our
to go to space.
our resolution, our conclusion to it. So that was a really great job. Okay, and so we're done with this book, and we're gonna